December 1971, a Soviet probe touched down on Mars and transmitted data back to Earth. Then, without explanation, it went silent forever. By the time Mars 3 arrived at the Red Planet, the space race was already written in history books. Apollo 11 had landed on the Moon 2 years earlier. The Soviets had lost. But that's the story everyone tells, and it's incomplete. What actually happened on the Martian surface that day changes how we understand both Soviet engineering and the fragility of space exploration itself. Let's start with the question nobody's asking. What would have happened if Mars 3 had succeeded completely? If Soviet engineers had landed a functioning rover on Mars in 1971, before any American had even launched toward the planet, the entire narrative of the space race pivots. But to understand why this mission matters, we need to go back and ask, why was the Soviet Union still racing at all? By 1971, the Soviets had achieved something remarkable. They'd landed unmanned probes on Venus. They'd sent rovers to the Moon. But Mars had humbled them. 3 previous attempts, Mars 1, 2, and a failed Mars lander in 1969, had all ended in catastrophe. So when they launched Mars 3, it wasn't hubris. It was desperation wrapped in engineering brilliance. Mars 3 was a lander, not a rover, not an orbiter. Actual physical spacecraft designed to survive the Martian atmosphere and send back images and soil data from the surface. It weighed 730 kilograms. Inside it, instruments to measure atmospheric pressure, temperature, wind speed, and soil composition. By December 2, 1971, it was descending through the Martian sky. But what conditions was it actually entering? Unbeknownst to mission control in Moscow, Mars 3 was descending into a storm, not a gentle dust devil, a planet-wide dust storm, the kind that hadn't been predicted by Earth-based observations. The probe's parachute deployed, the heat shields separated, everything was nominal, and then 5 seconds before landing, something catastrophic happened. The probe hit the ground, hard, its shock absorbers couldn't compensate for the velocity, the landing struts buckled, and in that moment of impact, something broke inside the spacecraft, something critical. But here's what makes Mars 3 extraordinary: it didn't die instantly, it transmitted. For 5 seconds it sent data back across 200 million kilometers of space. 14.5 seconds, that's longer than most people can hold their breath. In that window, Mars 3 sent telemetry, atmospheric readings, proof that it had landed. Soviet engineers cheered, they had done it. They'd put a spacecraft on Mars and retrieved data. Then the signal stopped. But the data was there, they had it, or did they? This is where the story fractures. The official Soviet account states that Mars 3 transmitted successfully and that soil composition data was received. But here's the problem: none of that data was ever published. Not in 1971, not in the decades that followed, not even after the Soviet Union collapsed and archives were opened. The data simply vanished. Historians have 3 competing theories. The first, the data was corrupted during transmission and was never actually recovered, and Soviet engineers simply claimed success to save face. The second, the data was recovered, but it revealed something about Martian geology or atmospheric composition that contradicted Western findings, so it was classified. The third theory is more unsettling. The third theory, the data was real, it was received, and it proved that Mars 3 had landed in a location far more scientifically interesting than anyone expected. If that were true, the Soviets would have wanted to send follow-up missions immediately. But they didn't. The Soviet Mars program essentially stopped. Why would a nation abandon a winning strategy? The truth, pieced together from declassified documents and interviews with surviving engineers, is simpler and sadder. Mars 3 did land, it did transmit, but the data was fragmentary, corrupted by the impact and the dust storm. The Soviets received partial readings, incomplete pictures, not enough to publish, not enough to claim total victory, not enough to justify continued funding during economic crisis. So Mars 3 became a footnote, a technical success that wasn't quite successful enough. It landed on Mars, it sent data, but because the data was incomplete, because it didn't deliver the knockout punch the Soviets needed, the entire achievement was quietly shelved. The probe itself, it's still there on the Martian surface, 730 kilograms of silent history. But here's what makes Mars 3 matter today. Every Mars mission we've sent, American, Chinese, or otherwise, uses lessons learned from both successes and failures like this one. We know now that Martian dust storms can obscure dust sensors. We know that impact dynamics on Mars are unpredictable. We know that 5 seconds of data is sometimes all you get. The real question isn't whether Mars 3 succeeded or failed. It's this: how many other space missions have we misremembered because the incomplete data was filed away and forgotten? How many times have we rewritten history because the messiest, most human moments, the partial successes, the near misses, don't fit the narrative we want to tell? Mars 3 touched down on December 2, 1971. It transmitted for 5 seconds, and then it became a mystery, not because it was secret, but because success and failure looked too similar to distinguish. The data it sent was real, the achievement was real, But the story we tell about it, that's still being written. So when you look up at Mars on a clear night, remember, there's a Soviet probe sitting on that surface right now, exactly where it landed over 50 years ago. It's not transmitting, it's not moving, but it's there, proof that sometimes the most important discoveries are the ones we almost made and then forgot to talk about. Subscribe. Every week we uncover the untold stories that changed space exploration, the ones history almost forgot.